Yes. Can I be heard? Oh.
So that's a good way of saying it.
Oh, yes. So I have been listening to the different opinions people have been having on the book, Adon and Tracy and Naomi, and I feel as if mine is opposite. It's actually different from, especially what Okal says about the autobiography. Okal paints Mandela, expects of Mandela the side of an author. But for me, I felt as if the book, as it was so natural of a person who lived his life, unlike autobiographies such as Born a Crime, where we had very, I would say, fictional ways of describing things, people dodging bullets and stuff. I feel as if A Long Walk to Freedom was so natural with the way that it was done. And I felt as if anyone could relate with everything that Mandela went through. And then the transitioning of periods in his life, the periods in his life, the transitioning from when he was in the country, when he goes to school, when he becomes a freedom fighter, all the way to the Rivonia trial, to Robben Island, and then finally to independence. I feel as if everything was so natural about that. So that is my first rebuttal about what people have said about the autobiography, what Okale and Adon perhaps have said about the autobiography. My own opinion about the book, about the autobiography, I feel as if, as I've said, it's a natural description of how a life of a freedom fighter has been lived. I feel as if he's putting out the way freedom fighters have always lived, people who have been fighting for a right cause all over the world. And I feel as if he's an authority on the life of freedom fighters, because in describing family, in describing relationships with other people, he's always using the phrase, a freedom fighter must live this way, a freedom fighter is devoid of this. I feel as if by writing this book and having, of course, spent 27 years in Robben Island, and probably more than 3 years with the the bans, movement bans, and the prisons in uh, I think Pretoria, Johannesburg. He has been imprisoned so many times. I feel as if he forms a very authoritative source on how freedom was fought for, probably in African countries and also in the Asian countries. So there is also the issue of violence, uh, whether the violence came too late. And Mandela actually responds to that. And he says the reason why they never wanted violence in the first place was that it would have the highest impact on the African people, on the African tribe, the causes, the black people, the black community would have the greatest blow of violence, because they were fighting a people who was a person who was a people, the regime was very willing to crush them at the slightest provocation. And it reflected again on what Professor has always been saying when we're having Abdulatif on doing things on moderation, and also reflects on the book on old age, which I always have admitted is my best read about youth. Probably the most dangerous thing about youth and the greatest advantage of old age is taking the rashness of youth. I feel as if when Mandela was a young man, he was very ready to battle anyone. It's only that he lacked the resources and the mobilization of the people. But when he becomes an old man, for instance, when he's going to jail, he's almost 50, 40 something. He has already passed the youth stage. I feel as if he's more reserved and he's looking at things not from the position of a youth league, of position of the youth league among the ANC, but from the position of an old man seated and seeing very far compared to a young man on top of a tree. So probably there is responding to one of the issues, pertinent issue on nonviolence. And then an interesting thing about Mandela's life, from the time he was born, I feel as if he was born for this. Okay. Oh, I. Oh, oh. Muted. I asked whether I can be heard. You can hear me right now. You are hearing me. Oh, okay. Uh, yes, I'm back. So the thing about Mandela, I feel as if he was born for this struggle. There are people who are given destinies when they are born. It as much as he says, I'll come to that. The name he was given, Ron Hila something, starting with an R, it means a troublemaker. And it as much as he says it could have been a coincidence that he had that name, and that name falls with the way he lives his life entirely. Trouble follows him. He arouses trouble everywhere he goes. I feel as if he was a miracle baby. The life that he started, the opportunities that he's having, in as much as he comes from a family that was leadership, the leadership blood was in them. I feel as if the fact that he encounters so many helpful people, people who are in his path to connect him to destinies, people like the regent, the fact that the father is the one who helped him rise to the position of a chief before the correct, or the heir who was supposed to ascend there, ascended to the throne. I feel as if the fact that he's meeting people who are very ready to support his cause and who direct what his life is going to look like the rest of his life. I feel as if it's not coincidence, it's not nature. I feel as if he was born for this cause. Another outstanding, I have so many outstanding things about the autobiography, because I feel as if it's among the best. It's actually wholesome with the description of the way he has lived. He's describing things in a way that he's painting a very perfect image of his life. Like, I'm not having questions about what happened in this phase of his life. He's describing friends. He's describing the places he has worked to. He's describing the schools he has been, his experiences as a mischievous Kosa boy, I don't know how to pronounce it. Um, Another outstanding feature of the autobiography is on the Africanism. I would call it Africanism, because as I was reading the novel, I was trying out the autobiography. I was trying to connect that with probably my own homeland, not my tribe, but the place that I come from. And it was interesting. Things like the land tenure, the system that was in Kenya, was the same system that was in South Africa, such that the British would want to paint, or the Afrikaners would want to paint a picture of a situation where nobody owned the land among the Africans. Land was owned by anyone, but Mandela is addressing that. And he said, as much as the land was not in the first place communal, it was only that it was being held in trust, in as much as there was no documented evidence on who owns the land or stuff. The land was not entirely ownerless. So the fact that the Afrikaners, the white people, would come and say that this land did not have an owner, and he's describing it in the first chapter, fact that this land, it didn't make sense, and it was never the case in either way, either in any position. And if I find the explanation the same with facing Mount Kenya, Kenyatta is disabusing that fallacy that land, the Africans, nobody owned land. Land did not belong to anyone. It was communal. And so it legitimizes the claim that a white person or a foreigner can come and have claim over the land. So I find so many similarities with the system in South Africa, among the Xhosa, the Bantu community in South Africa, and probably the Bantu community in Kenya and other places around Africa. The description of circumcision, I find so many similarities. And probably the thing our president said about the imaginary boundaries that we're having as a continent. I feel as if the fact that Mandela is also describing this in 1974, perhaps 50 years ago, that we are sharing everything, regardless of the country that we were positioned by the colonizers. I feel as if it pushes that agenda of having one continent, one people, we are one people regardless of the different countries. And then another thing I would want to point out, it has been emphasized about the education system, the fact that the Africans were having a different system from the whites, from the Afrikaners, and everything. A child of two worlds, the one professor recommended, and which has been a very amazing read, also has that. In our country in South Africa, the British had this common system of doing things. So they are putting these people in, they're indoctrinating these people into believing that everything English is what is right, up and until 1948, when now the Afrikaners, the nationalist party takes power in 1948. But when Mandela was studying, I feel as if they were trying to indoctrinate the Africans into hating themselves or disempowering the Africans or wanting the world to grow other than that of the Africans. And of course, it's unfair. Everything about apartheid is unfair, or you're having the majority having to live on their knees in a country that was predominantly theirs. I also find it very interesting. I had said I'll check it out. The fact that there's a national holiday for celebrating when the first landing to the Cape of Good Hope. I wonder whether it's still a national holiday right now in 1652. I think it's somewhere in October. I don't know whether the South Africans still observe that holiday, but I found it really not funny. It's sad and it's insulting that an oppressor would make it a holiday to celebrate the day he came to oppress you people. I don't know, feel as if the level of, how do I call it? The level of entitlement that the oppressors had on the the African majority was way above the roof. And then another thing about 1918, it's interesting, Mandela was born at that time. And it's interesting that ANC had been in operation 5 years before Mandela was born. And we were having a discussion with Mama, telling her I'm looking forward to have a dissect on this book, because South Africans were having the elections uh, just last week. They were concluded last week. And the fact that since 1994, this was the first election that ANC lacked the majority, to be, I feel as if the ANC movement or the Mandela movement is coming to an end. There's something the government, the people are not doing, and probably these the thing that happened in Kenya when KANU ended or stopped being in power in 2002. Feel as if for the South African, it as much as I don't want to get into details about that because I'm not sure, but I feel as if it was very interesting that this is the first time that the ANC failed to get the majority from the time it was formed in 1913 and the time that the first voting was done. And then I would probably mention something about the mines in which these people operated. The fact that the young people after circumcision, it's a thing about indoctrination. They were looking forward, terribly looking forward to go and work in the mines because it felt as if it was a sign of manhood. To be that was despicable in as much as it was laughable. The fact that it always worked to the advantage of the oppressor. These young Africans see it as heroism, going to work in the oppressor's things and stuff. And then another interesting bit was the Rivonia trial. I have heard Orengo, senior counsel, mention the Rivonia trial during the various, I am not audible. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I am audible. Okay. Let me put the phone here. The fact that Orengo has been mentioning it and Raila has also mentioned it in Field Marshal Mokami Kimathi Barrio about the Rivonia trial, and Mandela admitting that they are non-violent people. And the famous quote that I have heard with the politicians in Kenya and with the demonstrations, there are two types of violence, and not quoting exactly, but paraphrasing, there are loud violence, something around that, and then the violence that is illegal. The violence that the system uses to oppress the people is, the word is escaping me, is probably an immoral violence, something around that. And the force or the violence which the people uses to reiterate against the system is some kind of moral violence. And probably this is what Mandela mentions, in as much as he says a very famous quote that violence begets violence. They don't want violence because they know violence begets violence. And again, responding to what was said or what I said earlier on the reason why he feels as if there was no anything advantageous of using violence at the early stages, because the system was very ready to crush these people. For example, in Kenya, with the violence that was used before the British invasion, the population of the Kikuyus, the central province where the guerrilla warfare was actually very prevalent, the population decreased by around 2 million Kikuyus. That is what the British, and I feel as if South Africa was it was much worse than Kenya. So I feel as if the fact that Mandela was so, he never wanted to use violence, it was a very bright move. The Rivonia trial, as Okal has said, I also learned some tricks. I had seen them in movies, but because I trust what Mandela says is true, it's true to the core. I feel as if they have proper strategies to use in trial. There's also the thing about the system using the people under it to do things that they don't feel are correct. So there's this prosecutor, I am forgetting the name, in the Rivonia trial, who comes to tell Mandela that this was among my worst days. I don't feel it right to be going to court to send a person I personally believe not to be guilty to jail. The fact that they had worked with Mandela in practice and stuff. So I feel as if, and Mandela also acknowledges this, and that is why probably, to the detest of almost everyone in ANC, he wants to put the white minorities in the struggle for freedom, because he feels as if these people have been transformed by the system. What they are doing is not out of their own, and he's giving a description of a warden in Robben Island, when they are fighting that he's taken out, and he's taken out, he calls and he shows his humane side. And Mandela observes that and comes to a conclusion that the system is what was making them terrible. They were actually very, not good person, but they had the humane side in them. They were, in as much as they were the mortality of apartheid regime, the system was what was using, this is what was using them to fight. The fact that Mandela transitions in every position that he's going into being a leader, he starts with in school, he's a leader, he's a champion of stick fighting, he's a leader in what? In Johannesburg, he's a leader in Fort Hare, he's a leader in all the colleges that he goes, he's elected. He actually brings a revolution in the dormitory. Who is this school? The name of the school before he joins the college, Fort Hare College. The name of the school. Yeah, Clarkburg, something. Yeah, Clarkberry. Yeah, the fact that the seniors, he starts a revolution that makes the seniors look bad in the juniors, and he actually coins a very interesting phrase which I heard Governor Sakaja tell the deputy president Rigathi on the bullies being the weakest or something around that. Mandela says that bullies are brittle or something. They have an exterior an external brutal side or something of the sort, when this superior who has been looking down upon the juniors when they are defeated in the elections, and they go crying to the director's office or something of the sort. So the fact that he's a revolutionarist in every place that he goes, he's making life better in places he goes more than he found it. For me, that was very inspirational. And the fact that he's not silenced by anything, including the system, the fact that he's ready to train as a military officer in Addis Ababa for 6 months to save his people. I feel as if that is the greatest level of patriotism that any person can portray. And also, now merging that with the moderation, he's also doing all this in moderation. He has reached the point when the violence becomes the only option. To me, that was very inspirational, and I took it. And someone mentioned about stoicism. I feel as if Mandela was the greatest of all the people I've read about the stoic, yeah. I feel as if it's an embroiderment of what Seneca, letters of Seneca, about what personal happiness can do regardless of how your physicality or anything. And the fact that a happy slave or content a slave is actually in a better, is enjoying life, just paraphrasing, than a person who is very wealthy but lacks contentment. The fact that I feel as if that is what drove Mandela all the 27 years he was in Robben Island. And then aspect of loyalty, he's given so many goodies before he moves from Robben Island, but he still remains true to course. So for me, that was very inspirational. And actually, I feel as if Mandela was the best African leader, president, probably, or the best African. He was so selfless. In as much as other leaders have undergone what he has undergone, the fact that he's not cornered into living the true course, to me, that was very, very interesting. Probably, as I'm concluding, he describes something about Ethiopia. Ethiopia as it was seen in the books, and Ethiopia as he sees it. So he was expecting something very huge about Ethiopia, but he's disappointed to find that the apartheid regime in South Africa has developed more than the Ethiopia which has had independence. Yeah, he was describing this his first time when he was leaving South Africa to go and solicit for different things. So yeah, the fact that he's describing Ethiopia, I feel like he's so descriptive of everything, and he has a way of viewing things differently. I also learned something about Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, and probably Professor will expound on this, on capitalism. I don't know why the apartheid regime was so against capitalism. I've tried to read about capitalism. I was hoping Professor will recommend some books when I came for the book club. I know he will. The Myth of the Lazy Native, trying to understand something about capitalism and why it was so terrible in South Africa, such that anyone Mandela could be convicted on communism and be jailed for life imprisonment. So I was wondering why, something about the ideological differences, the communism and the capitalism, and why it was so in depth in South Africa. So that is all about the book. I'll be putting, I know I have forgotten many things, but as we proceed with the discussion, I'll be mentioning things that I remember. Back to you, moderator.